Hello and welcome. You are listening to... What are they listening to? The Investor Lab!
The Investor Lab.
Who are you?
I'm Gabby.
And I'm Goose.
Hello.
Hey! We're back.
Our intros are getting better and better.
They are, aren't they?
It's
Back
great.
once again with the ill behavior. Anyway, so we are back with the wrap-up. The season finale.
We have wrapped it up.
This is the episode where the Bachelor finally gets married. Is that what happens on that show?
I don't know. Let's say so.
I've got no idea. This is the day that the block gets sold. Is
Hey!
that what happens on that show?
Real estate, yeah.
I don't know what happens on season finales on TV, but this is like that.
Houses get sold and people get married. There you go.
Okay.
That's it.
Are you proposing to me?
Nope. Nope. I'm not. Nope.
Awkward.
Anyway.
Okay, so cool. Cool. Moving right along. So this is the season finale of the Hunting Hotspots series. Now, in this episode, we dig into why this is the season finale. We don't need to do that right now.
No.
Just listen to it and you'll find out. But the big three drivers that we cover in this episode are ripple effect, sea change, tree change, and jobs notes. And then we kind of do a bit of a wrap up and talk about why this is important and how we hope it's benefited you, all of that kind of stuff. But Gabby, what was your biggest takeaway out of this episode, do you think?
I just love tying it all together, tying it up in a neat little package. Nice package. But we brought in a lot of the previous drivers as well and kind of relating them to each other and how they're all like different colours on the colour wheel and how we can use them together to better inform and educate and empower people as investors, and how you can use this information to make better decisions and make better investments and actually apply the education that you have in the real world and not just listen to areas that you're told are kind of where you should buy.
Yeah, 100%. So, you know, this is I think a really deeply considered and very impactful episode. I think as a way to wrap everything up and a good prompt that if you haven't listened to all of the previous Hunting Hotspots episodes, you probably should.
Yep.
But let's get into it, Gabby. What do you think?
Awesome, let's do it.
Cool. And again, if you want some one-on-one help to navigate the well, I don't know, whatever. If you want help to buy a property, then we do that. We do that for very specific people, not for everyone. But if you want to find out if we might be able to help you, then reach out and let us know. And if we can't help you or we're not a good fit or whatever the case may be, because we're not for everyone. What we do is quite specialist. So if we're not a good fit, then we'll refer you to someone who is a good fit.
Yep.
Because regardless of whether we can help you or not, we want you to succeed. We want you to win. Mm-hmm. So let us know. And if you want to download this guide to make sure you get the most out of this whole series, then head to theinvestorlab.com.au/resources. I don't know. I just made up the / Is that a real thing? Is that a place to
I believe it's a thing. Give it a go.
Give it a crack.
It's somewhere there.
All right, guys. Without any further ado, I look forward to seeing you on the inside. Hey guys, welcome back to the Investor Lab. Gabby.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you guys?
You talking to me, I think?
Yeah, we're good. The collective crowd
The
joining me.
Yeah. The thing with podcasts is it's just me and you in the
There's
room.
no crowd.
There is no crowd.
Hello and welcome. I'm good. Can you tell?
Why?
I went to the gym.
For a few endorphins. You got the dwarfs.
Got the dwarfs. High on dwarfs.
High on dwarfs.
Yeah. How are you?
Oh, gee whiz. That suddenly went downhill. Oh, how are you? I'm actually good. Yeah, I'm good. I'm jacked up on the dwarfs as well.
Dwarfs are good. Dwarfs are underrated.
They are. They are indeed underrated.
Should let more people know about the dwarfs.
What are we doing today, Gabby? I don't think
know.
people came to
Who
hear
knows?
about us.
Who knows what we're doing?
We do. Don't tell people
Except
that.
us.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone expects us to know what we're doing. We know what we're doing, guys. We know what we're here. What are we going to be talking about today?
You know what? Hunting hotspots. But we're doing it a little different, guys.
We are.
We're doing it a little different.
Indeed.
We're gonna jam pack the final 3 core drivers into this one mega episode.
Why are we doing that?
Because we basically determined that this is probably going to finish in about April 2021. And we went, that's not acceptable.
It's long.
That's not okay.
Do you remember when you were doing like a project at in high school or whatever, or primary school probably, or high school, whatever? You're doing like a project and you had to like write the title, like, and you're drawing it.
Yes.
And then you were like, you worked out, okay, it might be whatever the word is. And then you always stuffed it up and left the last couple of letters that were too close to the end. And your first letter is perfectly spaced. The second letter is perfectly spaced. And by the time you get to the ing, it's just like squeezed.
Yep.
Yes. It's kind of like that.
So this is the
We're running too close to the edge of the page. We're squeezing them in.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that. Yep. There's another reason as well.
Yes, what's that?
Well, the other reason is that, we kind of wanted to bookend this. We did want to bookend this in a year. We thought we clearly didn't the part of the thing is that we have added so much more content to this podcast. When we started this series, I think it was back in June or something. I can't even remember.
Wow. Yeah,
it was a fair while ago, and at the time the format was either you and I were doing an episode or I was doing an episode with a guest, right? Mm-hmm. And so we kind of looked at it and we went, yeah, okay, there's essentially 11 episodes in this. Yeah, cool, great. It'll come out over the next period of time. But then we started adding in more stuff. We started adding in, we didn't just want to talk about Hunting Hotspots, you and I. So we're like, okay, we'll do the Hunting Hotspots like every second time that we catch up and talk. But then we also threw in, got Charlie in the mix doing a pretty regular spot. And then we added some investor stories as well, and all of a sudden it's elongated our runway to the point that at one stage we were looking at it and it was going to take us until I think it was like June 2021. And so we sort of went, okay, hang on a second, what are we doing here? Not only that, like moving into the new year, I want to be able to wipe the slate clean a little bit and think about how else we're going to be showing up in the world and what value we're going to be bringing and who we're going to be bringing that for and all of that kind of stuff. So I think it's really good for us to give this some finality, and not least of which we've covered so much ground. Like these kind of like the last three that we're going to be covering today do kinda in some ways touch on stuff we've already spoken about before.
Yeah.
Even though they are like distinctly different characteristics, they harken back to some of our previous episodes. Yeah. So I think it's okay for us to sort of truncate these ones a little bit and get them into a usable format, because at the end of the day, there's a whole document that people can download to go and take these home as well. Mm-hmm. If you want to get that, how to identify a real estate hotspot, just head to theinvestorlab.com.au, go to the resources section, download it. It's free. There's loads of cool stuff in there, so you can like go and digest all of them. So it's not like this is the single receptacle of truth. There's a whole document that we've got that you can have. So I think it's okay. Mm.
This is kind of the beauty of what we're talking about through the series as well, is that they're all it's a beautiful mix of these 10 core drivers where they all kind of mesh in together and they all complement each other. It's like a color wheel, really. Going back to that primary school analogy.
It's like a color wheel.
You've got testing my color knowledge. Three primary colors.
Are you sure there's only 3?
Oh, don't do that. I believe there's three. I'm sticking with it.
But what about rainbows? There's loads of colors in rainbows.
Yeah, that's a different conversation, dude. It's a different podcast. But it's kind of, you got these 10 core primary colors that, they all some of them really complement each other. Some are like at opposite ends of the spectrum. Others are like right next to each other where they kind of related, but they're a little bit different. So
I like that. I do actually like that analogy that you just used, because it's kind of like, you don't need, if these are the 10 colors on your palette, right, and you're a painter, it's really about what type of painting you're going to make with these colors, and you don't need a huge smorgasbord. You don't need every color in the universe to paint a masterpiece. And if you've got these 10 and understand them, then you're going to be able to paint a beautiful picture for your own life.
Good analogy we just pulled out of nowhere.
All right, so just a quick recap before we go into this one. So the first category was, I'm just going to quickly run through them. So number 1 was transport and infrastructure. Number 2 was the ugly duckling syndrome. Number 3 was urban renewal and government policy. Number 4, lifestyle features. Number 5, boomtown syndrome. Number 6, the stayers. Number 7, which was the last one we did, education and medical infrastructure. And so that means that in this episode, we're going to be touching on things like the ripple effect, sea change and hill change, and jobs nodes. And we'll even do a little bit of a wrap up and a little conclusion. What do you think?
Sweet. Let's do it.
All right. Awesome. Sweet. So the ripple effect. What's that?
The ripple effect is essentially the concept that capital growth tends to ripple outwards from typically major centers, so major cities or regional centers. Kind of starts in the very center. So the imagery is like if you drop a pebble in water, it's that ripple outwards and it creates these rings that spread outwards. So that can happen over a period of years in terms of capital growth in a location, right?
Yep. Yeah, no, it's a good analogy. It's a good analogy because what it actually is, it's an affordability wave, right? So what typically happens if you imagine now this isn't exclusive to capital cities, and we'll kind of touch on this in a moment. The easiest way to think about it is with a capital city. If you imagine that when there's a real estate cycle, right, because real estates move in cycles and waves, right? So a lot of people, when they think about a real estate cycle, they think about it as a circle because they think like when they put their washing on cycle, it goes around and round and around. But real estate cycles happen in kind of waves. They go up and down and sideways and stuff like that, right? So when a particular capital city goes through a cycle, what tends to happen is that the prices will go up closer to the center first, and then that price rise will slowly move itself outwards in a concentric circle kind of fashion, or in a ripple kind of fashion, and we kind of see that hugely play out in places like Sydney and Melbourne. A good example is we'll use Melbourne as an example here because I've got some numbers on that. If you look at Glen Iris, Ashburton, and Chadstone, like Glen Iris is more expensive than Ashburton and Chadstone. In 2019, the median price in Glen Iris was 1.8 million, and Ashburton was 1.05 million. And 1.65 million, and in Chadstone was 1.05 million. And this is just an example of how that kind of plays out. Now, a lot of people think that just means that the cheaper stuff is on the edges, but here's a different way to think about it. It's actually the movement of price that changes. So whilst it is probably true that on the outskirts of the suburbs, outskirts of the cities is where you're going to find lower prices, when we actually think about price movement, it tends to happen in waves. So if, for example, the inner suburbs were to go up by 10%, you would expect that is then going to move itself concentrically outwards to the outer suburbs, and they slowly will all come up by 10%. This is very general in nature, right? And what that is, it's just an indication of prices rising in a more desirable suburb and people going, you know what, it's just probably a little bit outside of my reach right now. It's not as affordable as it once was. It's kind of past a precipice for me. I'm happy to go to the suburb next door where I'm still quite close to where I want to be and the prices are just a little less. And then because of that demand movement, what tends to happen is those prices then go up because of the demand, and the same process happens again and again and again, and people get pushed further and further out.
Do you see this as it's a good coupling with the ugly duckling in terms of people might want to be in one location, but actually affordability puts them slightly further out, a little ring further out, and through that process, that's how that ugly duckling starts to form?
100%. It's good. I'm really glad you tied it back to that because you're right. That is pretty much what happens. There's a desirable pocket, and then people go, okay, what's the next best thing? Because the price has gone up, and they go to the next one and the next one and the next one. Now, the idea that it happens in an exact circle isn't true, right? There are other factors in there in terms of things like accessibility, transport, and all of these other kind of factors. So if you look back through the rest of the hunting hotspots, you're actually going to see the kind of drivers that would indicate one area would do this rather than another. However, when you're looking at a market that is growing, you can then kind of, if you look at what the other drivers are, transport, jobs, all of this kind of stuff, you can go, okay, well, if the prices have risen there, where are they going to rise next? And you can position yourself on the edge of that ripple. Mm-hmm. So the interesting thing is that this doesn't just happen in capital cities, and it isn't just it isn't constrained to that. It happens on a macro level as well. So if you think about the fact that in in the early 2000s, I think it was around 2001-ish or whatever, Brisbane started a boom. That as prices went up in Brisbane, people then started moving to the Sunshine Coast. But there was a lag. There was a lag there of a good few years. Vice versa, you see the part of the reason that Tasmania has broadly performed quite well, and specifically Hobart, is because of that affordability, because there was real estate booms on the mainland, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, and that drove prices up. And then people looked for affordability and lifestyle and these other kind of things that we've spoken about before, and then moved to those areas. And then you can kind of see it on a macro level as well, and you can start to think, okay, well, if prices in Sydney and Melbourne have gone up and they're becoming not affordable, where are people going to go next? And then when you tie that in with the other factors of the hunting hotspots, that's where you can start to see where those trends are going to go.
And I guess you can think about it, like if we go back to all the infrastructure points, you can think about it in terms of like direction of which way the ripple goes, because you're right, it's not usually a perfect circle out.
Yeah.
I mean, Melbourne's probably the closest you would get to it kind of actually circling out at different points and different times and whatnot. But with the infrastructure, it's kind of like a lot of those projects get put in places that pull the ripple out that way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So
that's planned urban renewal and planned infrastructure projects that are designed to pull a ripple in a certain direction.
Yeah, so you think like, again, I'm going to use Melbourne as the example, but you think like Sunshine becoming a major employment hub, that is going to pull the ripple further out that way, where it's kind of the ripple's kind of gone maybe north and then southwest and then southeast as well, where it hasn't quite gone that northwest. So it's going to kind of pull the ripple out that way. And then the same as like we were talking about medical and education infrastructure.
Yep.
If you think about like the university out at Chadstone, it's like putting that there pulled the ripple out towards it as well, from the city of Melbourne towards out that way. So I think, again, combining this with infrastructure as well is going to help to identify kind of which way the ripple is going to go, because it will naturally fill in between.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So it's a really good rule of thumb. Like, you can make a lot of money out of this if you start paying attention to the trends. Like, I always think trends are way more interesting than static data. Anyone can say this is what is happening, but if you can look at a trend and understand what the basis is of the trend, you can start to position yourself on the front edge of demand. The easiest way to make money in business, in real estate or whatever, is not to try and invent demand, but just to work out where the demand is going and stand in front of it. Right? And that's the goal. Like that is our goal as buyers agents. That's what we do very well, is we go, okay, so the demand is now there. Like that's where the peak of the demand wave is right now. So like one of the things that we look for, or one of the signs that says we need to look for the next part of the ripple, is when we're in a market. We typically get into a market first. We're very good at being first to market in certain locations. And then what tends to happen is that other people will then start to notice the trend after we did, and then other investors and buyers agents and all that kind of stuff will start to move into an area. And then what we'll see the demand pick up, which is great because it's what drives growth. Then we'll see things like multi-offers and all of this kind of stuff happening, and then that is a key indicator for us to go, okay, cool. So here is where the demand is now, which is great because it's where we were. Where are we going to go next? Where is the demand going to move to next? When these prices go up, what's going to change? Where are people going to go and why? Because there's always a big question about affordability.
Yeah. So, I think with that as well, it's also about like making sure that, because it's all, we can be as educated as we want to be, and we can learn all of this and we can understand these principles, but it does come down to as well, it's like it is relatively speculative, any of these points. So like even which way is demand going and where is it going to go next, like to some degree it is speculation. I mean to a certain degree, yes, but I don't want to, I'm interested in your point, but I would say that it's only speculation if you don't look at the other factors,
Right.
Fair.
I think anything that you think is going to happen in the future is speculation.
Yep.
Like, okay, so I'm speculating that if I count my calories and go to the gym every day, I'm speculating that I will lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
It is only fact once it has happened, and then I can say, aha, my speculation or my assertion or my assumption was correct.
Yep.
However, if we can take some known factors, if you're on the edge of a city and then you go, okay, well, I don't know, like I guess prices are going up here. I guess I'm going to go buy some farmland because it's just going to keep going that way. That might not make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the other factors, and if you look at things like, where are rents rising, where are vacancy rates dropping, where are jobs happening, where are people moving, and why? What are the key things? And look at all these other factors, and look for where you can get some of these factors to meet together. You're significantly increasing the probability of your success. Just in the same way that, hey, you could track your calories and go to the gym every day and not lose weight. However, it is much more likely that if you track your calories every day and eat less calories than you burn and go and exercise for 1 hour every day, it is much more likely you're going to lose weight than if you just speculated that, hey, if I just walk in the door and out of the door of the gym, I've technically checked in and checked out and I'm tracking my calories and it doesn't really matter what they are. I'm just like, I'm looking at them. You've got to sort of think about how to layer these things together. And I think that would significantly increase people's chance of success, which is quite like actually why I really like this whole series, because once people can start to think about these things, and along with the whole rest of the whole last year's worth of podcasts and stuff like that we've been doing, talking about things like psychographics and all of these kind of overlays, that's what's going to allow people to start to see the patterns and see the trends and start to weed through this kind of stuff to increase their chance of success.
Yeah, and I guess when you peel it all back, like speculating is all anyone is ever doing in this industry, right? As you said, you can arm yourself up with this knowledge and these tools, but anything that isn't currently fact and is discussing potential future is a speculation in one way or another. You can be 99.9% confident that is going to happen, but in some degrees it's still speculation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think using all of these points together, it's in the same way, like you can speculate which way a ripple is going to go and position yourself there in front of the demand before it gets there. But if that is kind of the only thing and there's nothing else really driving it, then you're also speculating on the timing of how long that's going to take. So I think of the example of like when kind of in Geelong, they announced all the major new offices being relocated there. A lot of people were like, oh, you got to buy in Lara, which is basically in the middle of the highway between
middle of nowhere, basically,
Melbourne and Geelong, and everyone kind of said, oh, Lara, you got to get in Lara now. They've announced all this stuff in Geelong. Like Lara's going to go off because it's halfway between, which is in some ways correct because they're thinking, infrastructure going that way.
It's true on like a 20-year macro.
Yeah, but it's about the timing of, okay, the ripple is going to go this way, but I'm speculating how long that ripple is going to take. And it's kind of like, if you can afford to just sit there and wait for the ripple, then fine, do that. But if you don't want to wait an undetermined amount of time and you want to have a bit more control, then you need to look at a few more of these drivers that we've been talking about, rather than just going, well, the ripple has to go that way eventually, which I think a lot of people think. I think a lot of people... Again, you think about Melbourne and you think about the inner rings and people kind of think, well, if I position myself kind of this far away from the city, which is the same as like Brunswick distance away, but in that direction, like it has to kind of go that way eventually, right? And it's like probably will. Yeah, eventually. But who knows when that's going to happen?
Yeah, exactly. That's a really great analogy because you've got to look at what the other differentiating factors are. Like ripples in and of themselves don't do anything. You've got to look at what are the characteristics of which way that's going and how might that impact on the future prosperity or the near field potential. So the Lara example is really great because if you said, okay, well, theoretically, Geelong is a node and that would have its own ripple effect. And Melbourne is a node and that would have its own ripple effect. Now, you can kind of go, okay, well, where are they going? And then look at the other factors. And if there is, like, Lara doesn't have a lot going for it, right? There's no big infrastructure projects or construction. Like, it's lovely, right? If you're listening to this in Lara, I'm not having a go at you. But there's not there's none of those kind of major growth drivers there because of the supply. There's still a lot of land there, right? And so that in and of itself is going to be a detrimental factor, which would slow down the prosperity or the potential of that area to grow. Same kind of thing in the area of Pimpama. Now, you can look at Brisbane and the Gold Coast and you can very clearly see there is a growth corridor that is going to be happening between the Gold Coast and Brisbane. And it is already starting to happen, just in the same way that between Geelong and Melbourne, there is a growth corridor that is slowly being built out. However, when you look at the impact of supply on those kind of areas, you can start to see that you're more likely to have to wait a long time. So if you're playing a 20-year game, sweet, awesome. It's probably one of the best things you can do is to buy cheap land in the way of where you perceive a growth corridor is going to be. But you've got to have the money to wait, and you've got to, and that's a long-term speculation play. Whereas I would much rather go, okay, well, where can I position myself on the front edge of demand and reduce my chance of risk or my probability of risk?
The flip side of that is you could also try and do more of like a boomtown strategy. So like, again, using Lara, there is Avalon Airport. So when I think that was announced, they may have announced, but I think there was an announcement about doing international flights in and out of there. And I'm pretty sure after that announcement, like, median prices in Lara and Avalon, that area, went up because people were like, oh, that's the place to be. They're about to do international flights. But then it pretty quickly subsided.
Yeah.
Because it may have not gone ahead, or it just kind of, because there's nothing else pulling people to that area. There's oversupply and there's nothing else there. It was like there's this one trick pony of the airport, and then that kind of fizzled, and now there's still the oversupply and there's still nothing else pulling people there.
Totally.
So, sorry if you're listening in Lara.
But you know what's really interesting about this ripple effect is it actually plays into these other two things that we're going to be talking about as well.
Yep.
Right, because number 9 is sea change and hill change. Now, we'll tie all this stuff together at the end of this episode because they all kind of interrelate. Because we've touched on the number 10 is jobs nodes, right? So what we specifically were just talking about then was the fact that unless it has a jobs node, unless it's got these other kind of driving factors going towards it, people probably aren't going to move there. Now, sea change and hill change is one of the biggest. Sea change more specifically, for the last 20, 30 years, everyone's known about the sea change trend and everyone wants to live near the beach. And I think the majority of Australians live within 50 kilometres of the beach. The vast majority of Australians live within 50 kilometres of the beach. And this has been a huge driver of growth over the last 20, 30 years. But it's easy to sit there and think, oh, well, as long as I buy near the beach, it's going to go pretty well. However, again, part of the reason people move to places like sea change locations, we'll get to hill change in a second, but part of the reason people move to sea change locations is because they want to have a better lifestyle for cheaper, right? So they might be in Sydney or whatever, and they're like, oh, I'm sick of being in the concrete playground. I want to live somewhere that's closer to a beach, and I can, have a better lifestyle. And it's typically driven by affordability as well. Not always, because you have places like Palm Beach and stuff which are crazy expensive too. But the point being that there's still other differentiating factors. It's not as simple as buy near the beach and you will get rich. It has to have other factors as well. So if you take, for example, the New South Wales coast, there's dozens, literally could even be hundreds, I'm not even sure, of towns along the beach. However, some of them have grown very well and others have not. And in fact, you can look at the same thing in Victoria. You can look at the same thing in any state in Australia, and you can look at some seaside locations which have gone very, very well and seen a lot of growth, and others that haven't. And if we use Sunshine Coast as an example, now that had the benefit of being affected by the ripple effect, which we touched on earlier. But it was by the beach, but it wasn't really growing much. It was actually a bit of an underperformer because it didn't have other things going for it as well until the ripple effect started to kick in, and at the same time they started adding infrastructure projects and jobs projects and all of that kind of stuff there. So then that's what started to push that to drive and to grow as well. So all of a sudden you start combining things like affordability and also jobs and also ripple effect and also, lifestyle and all these other factors.
It's funny, I was having this exact conversation with my mum the other day about, because we see this obviously, particularly through 2020 and kind of the last 6 to 9 months, the exodus to affordability and lifestyle, where people are just realizing that they can work from anywhere. Not everyone, but a lot of people are going, hey, I can work from home permanently, and people are putting in requests to do that. And then on the back of that is, okay, well, I can work from home. Why am I working here? Why do I live here? Oh, I moved here because work is nearby, but now I don't need to live near work. Why do I live in this city that I don't like when I can go, again, like most people have a pull to eventually live by the beach, right? It's a generalization, but research shows that that's relatively accurate.
Or he'll change, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. So people are thinking through that. So my mum was actually talking about this, and she actually pointed out, I hadn't actually talked about that we're seeing this in the data at the moment through our business, but she was like, I just imagine a lot of people are like want to move to the beach. Like, why don't they just go to, like, surely you just pick a small, sleepy, like, beachside town anywhere, like on the East Coast. Like, there'd be heaps of places, and you just pick one. You go kind of near a city, but you just go maybe an hour out of the city, and you get nearly as good, like, lifestyle, but you're only an hour drive to, like, the infrastructure you need or whatever. And surely, because everyone kind of wants to move to the coast now, and because people feel like they can move to the coast now, surely then prices are gonna rise all along the coast and in all of those towns. Like, surely you can pretty much wing it at the moment. And I was walking her through, like, the infrastructure and how there's, like, I don't know how many towns there are along the whole East Coast, but thousands, I imagine, where not all of them experience price growth. And we were talking through, like, a lot of it is about transport infrastructure, and the accessibility to that place is still what people want. Like, people might like the idea of, I'm going to go and live in, like, a little remote town, and that's going to be me. I'm going to be a nomad and do all that. But realistically, people can't function like that. Most people can't function like that permanently. So people still want, like, accessibility to wherever they need to go. People still want good internet. People still want roads. People still want a hospital nearby. You know, there's still all of these factors that is kind of why not every town along the coast has these huge booms.
Totally. I mean, you look at Yamba as an example. We'd love to talk about Yamba on this show.
Totally, yep.
We should get sponsored by, like, Yamba Tourism or something like that. That'd be hilarious. Have a real estate podcast sponsored by Yamba Tourism. No, but, like, the reality is, you know,
Yamba's terrible. Don't go there, guys.
Don't go there. It sucks. It sucks. Yeah, part of the reason that started to really grow in value, like prices started shooting up there, was because they did a highway expansion. So they turned the Pacific Highway or whatever. There was a huge project to widen that and, you know, make the roads better, and all of a sudden people could get there easier. Prices shot up. Like prices have gone up by 50% in the last 5 years. Yep. However, if you look just down the coast at a place called Woolley, if you're from there, let me know.
Woolley.
Woolley. Woolley. If you're in Woolley, let us know. Anyway, so I'm going to call it Woolley. So Woolley doesn't have as much infrastructure, right? So it doesn't have the same internet infrastructure, doesn't have the same commerce, doesn't have the same... Now, beautiful, right? So it's a beautiful spot on the beach, ostensibly, you know, similar. Yeah, it's like a beachfront location on the East Coast, just surrounded by forests. Hey, wonderful, amazing. But it doesn't have enough stuff there to make it as desirable. So you've still got to look at these things like, what are the core industries and all of that kind of stuff. Now, one of the reasons that some coastal locations have performed better than others is because the ones that are most reliant on tourism as a single source of their economy tend to have more fragile growth cycles. So, for example, you can look at some places in the mid to far north Queensland coast where the single economic driver is the fact they're close to the Great Barrier Reef. And they have typically underperformed in growth because they don't have other factors. Like they might have things like agriculture, but it's not a major centre. If you look at somewhere like Rockhampton, now Rockhampton is a major agricultural centre, plus there's mining, plus it's got 4 or 5 different factors in it, right? Now, only reason I use Rockhampton is because that has a diversified economy. But if you then say look at somewhere like Airlie Beach, the predominant industry there is tourism. And so on that basis, it's seasonal and all of this kind of stuff as well, and so there's more fragility there. However, when these desirable seaside locations can also couple that with more long-term projects, so it could be expanding on infrastructure and accessibility, but also then creating more jobs in the area, that's when they really start to take off.
Do you think internet is a big factor?
Nowadays, yes.
Yeah, because I was just thinking through, like, even when we went to Yamba, guys, in case you didn't know, we went to Yamba.
Sponsored by Yamba Tourism.
When we went to Yamba, part of the point, we kind of had an idea when we were going up the coast, so we wanted to go to Yamba and stay there for a couple of weeks. But the biggest part was, what is the internet situation? Because we run our business online, and people who progressively, more and more people are working from home permanently, so internet is such a big thing. So when we were going there, we were like, if it doesn't have NBN or doesn't have really high-speed internet, we just can't stay here.
Yeah, we do podcasts, we do all kinds of stuff. We need to be able to upload them.
Like, it's not even like a desirable. It's like we just couldn't stay probably more than a day.
No.
Is just the reality of our situation right now. And I think a lot of modern businesses and modern business owners who run their businesses online are in the same boat. So it's like you might find a beautiful location and has infrastructure, like in terms of transport, gets there, but you get there and there's like no phone reception.
Yeah.
And no internet. And you're like, it's beautiful and I love it here, but I just can't stay here because I can't do what I need to do.
Great place for a holiday.
Totally. Yeah.
Great place for a holiday, but maybe not a place that you would want to set up a commercial enterprise or bed yourself in for the long term if you have a need to be connected with the outside world.
Yeah.
So you got other things as well, like rail. So you got internet, rail, road, airports and stuff like that. Because one of the reasons that Byron Bay has, aside from its proximity to places like Brisbane and whatever being so far up the New South Wales coast, is also its the Ballina Airport and places like that. So Ballina's gone well because of the Ballina Airport too, because people can move to those locations and live there. And the reality is, even if they have a job in Sydney, they might be able to negotiate now to go, look, I'm happy to come to Sydney once a month or even once a week, depending on what they're doing. And they can get to the airport, fly to Sydney, do a day in the office and fly back and do it all in one day and have every other day of the week living by the beach. All right. Now, I won't lie. When we were up the coast, I was weighing up those decisions. I was like, cheaper to live up here, better lifestyle, need to go to Sydney from time to time.
Warmer? You like slightly warmer?
I like the heat. I'm a hot house flower. Yeah, and so like thinking about those other factors of like, okay, how would I be able to get around? Like, is it practicable? Right? Is it practicable to get around? Because you could also then say, well, you got a place like Weipa in far north Queensland, which is on the coast. Is it actually on the coast? Anyway, pick somewhere on the Gulf of Carpentaria, and go, okay, well, why isn't that going? It's like, well, it's remote as hell and there's not that much going for it. And even if it had an airport, it's still probably going to be 3 hours flight to get to Brisbane or something like that. So you've got these kind of desirability factors, aside from the fact you'll get eaten by crocodiles and everything else up there as well. But
always a good selling point.
Yeah. Exactly. So crocs
we should start a tourism company.
Yeah, crocs are all right. All right, so we kind of covered sea change. Now it is a very strong driver, but it's not the only factor. Like beach locations work only when they have those other kind of elements working towards them. But here's the thing: beaches aren't for everyone. Like, for example, growing up, my parents, we would go to the beach from time to time. They didn't hate it, but given a choice, or if they asked what is more desirable to you, they would choose the mountains. They would choose to go on a hot day. They would choose to go into the mountains and find a freshwater creek for us to swim in, because we grew up in the country, then go to the beach. They'd say, why would you want to go to the beach on a hot day? It's just sun everywhere. There's no shade. It's just like, oh my God, it's like it's death out there. And they would prefer to be in a shadier, leafier, it's typically cooler when you're not at the beach, or like when you're, well, that's not entirely true. It's cooler when you're in the hills with more shade and more plantation and all of that kind of stuff. They would choose that. So here's the thing. Sea change isn't for everyone. Hill change also can be, right? Now, the fundamentals are the same. We need to look at the ripple effect. Where are people going and why, right? Because they typically are going to ripple out from some other major centre of activity. You need to think about accessibility and transport. And you've got to think about lifestyle. Now, the benefit of hill change is it's typically cheaper than sea change, right? You're typically lower prices because guess what? Those real estate agents can't pitch things like ocean views and stuff like that, right?
Tree views.
You can see the leaves from your
Look at
balcony.
the leaves. Look at them all.
So you've kind of got different factors. Now, a lot of people think that hill change grows less than sea change. That's not entirely true. That is not entirely true. Colloquially, you can see examples where that is true. However, the inverse is also correct, right? So if you look at places like the Adelaide Hills, that's performed very well in terms of capital growth. You know, you've looked at places like Malini, which has benefited from the ripple effect of the Sunshine Coast and also the hill change or tree change factor, where the Sunshine Coast started to go up in value and everyone said, well, you know what, I like being close to the Sunshine Coast and I also like having accessibility to Brisbane, but I don't need to be down there amongst the hustle and bustle. I would prefer to live in, Malini's beautiful. It's got like beautiful forests and beautiful hills and it's stunning, it's stunning. And so people are going, okay, well, I can live there and I can have an equally beautiful but slightly different lifestyle. And also it tends to appeal to people who are seeking out more of a community because there tends to be more of a community feel and stuff like that. So it's another way to think about how people might be choosing a location, but simply because it's in the hills or simply because it's surrounded by paddocks doesn't make it a good choice. You've still got to think about those other factors like ripple effect, transport and infrastructure, affordability, jobs nodes, all of these other kind of factors that are going to indicate that people are going there.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point because I think, it always comes back to psychographics. It's like you might not like the idea of moving into the hills and you might personally we love the beach, right? At this stage in our life, we've chosen to live in Bondi Beach because beach, cosmopolitan kind of lifestyle, this is what motivates us and makes us feel happy. And, it's the lifestyle that we are fortunate enough to choose to live. But other people have the priority of they want to have a probably more naturally beautiful environment, which you get in the hills and you get in those tree change locations. And they might want somewhere that is quieter. And like you said, they might want more of a community, have it a more tight-knit, you kind of know everyone that lives nearby. But it's understanding that everyone has different priorities and it's not always the same as what you think. So like us, we think we want to live in Bondi Beach. Why doesn't everyone want to live here? A lot of people do want to live here and a lot of people do live here. And so it's noisy and not everyone wants that. So then, yeah, I think it's just applying this overlay to all the other factors where different people want to move for different reasons. So that's kind of why a tree change location can be just as high performing as a beach location because it appeals to that particular niche of people who really want that solution.
Yep.
They want natural beauty, but they don't want to go to a beach because it's too noisy or too busy or whatever. So they're like, well, natural beauty I can get over there and it's quieter and that's what I like instead.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And you can still get waterfront on a river, for example. So there's a couple of things as well. It's like this sea change, tree change driver, it's kind of like the lifestyle, lifestyle things that we've been talking about before and affordability. So some of the areas that have previously performed well and then are currently now performing well again off the back of everything that's been happening in 2020 at places like Cairns, Sunshine Coast, Adelaide Hills, Port Macquarie, the Hunter region is starting to grow again. Southern Highlands, Macedon Ranges, Baw Shire. These are all places that have they have robust enough economies to be able to support communities.
Yeah.
And also have good connectivity and also have good lifestyle drivers. And they're a bit of a spread there, right? So there's places like the Adelaide Hills. There was a road or a tunnel link that was built which opened up the accessibility between the Adelaide Hills and the Adelaide CBD, and that transformed the growth in that area. And so when you start thinking about these factors, you can really start to pin down where people are going to go and why, which kind of lenses into the last piece, which is jobs nodes. Now, we've sort of been talking in and around this, but I want to talk a little bit more specifically, because this isn't specifically related to lifestyle areas. This is something you can start to think about in any location.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So
what is a jobs node?
Great question. So jobs nodes are typically associated with planned government initiatives, right? So for example, if you look at places like in Melbourne, they designated jobs nodes plans for places like Dandenong, places like Sunshine, Epping, and what they did. So what they did, and Geelong, and in Sydney there was Blacktown, and in Perth there's Armidale and the Kwinana precinct and Rockingham and Joondalup as well. That's one as well. So there's some specifically designated jobs node areas. Now you ask what they are. Well, that is where the government says, okay, so what we want to do is we want people to move in a certain direction. Therefore, we're going to create a cluster of opportunity, and we're going to create incentives to encourage businesses to operate there. We're going to invest in infrastructure to give that the connectivity it needs. We're going to do all of this kind of stuff to drive these specific areas of commercial intent, because what that is going to do is that's going to help people move in that direction, right? So in the case of Dandenong, there was rail links, better rail links were established. They incentivized governments to set up head offices out there. They made it more of an industrial commerce center, all that kind of stuff. The idea is it decentralizes the commercial opportunity and employment opportunities from people, and moves them and helps them to dictate where the ripple effect is going to be, so they can plan an infrastructure. Because if everything happened ad hoc, they wouldn't even know where to build the roads. They'd be like, oh my God, let's build a road this way and see if people want to move that way. Yep. So what they do is they designate specific locations. So other jobs nodes include the northern suburbs of Brisbane. There's big jobs nodes out there. Ipswich, the jobs node. Sunshine Coast in and of itself, jobs node. And these are specifically designated and planned projects that are designed to decentralise and create economic prosperity in a variety of different locations. Adelaide, Salisbury and Elizabeth, jobs node. Slightly different, but in the city of Marion, that's another jobs node, or that's more of an innovation centre, but again, similar kind of idea in Adelaide. So there's a few, you can see lots of examples of this where they specifically go, okay, we're moving people in that direction.
Yeah, and this is kind of what we were talking about earlier about directing which way the ripple is going to go, right? This is generally, again, looping back to urban renewal, which is point number 2, I think. Back in 2018. But generally, right, it's like the state government level generally that do this kind of planning, right? But it's not, like you said, it's not ad hoc, it's not accidental. They plan, right, this is the population that we need to account for in 20 years' time. Where are they all going to go? And everyone needs jobs, and everyone needs houses. So they look at the map and they go, okay, well, this is kind of what's happening at the moment. This is the near future. What is going to happen in terms of people movement? If we put a jobs node over there, that should fill out by the time we get to 20 years' time. And then that's kind of how it's going to fill the population that we need to fill. So it was interesting you said about like they incentivize businesses to set up their major headquarters and things, or their new projects kind of in these new spots. Because you're right, like these businesses and these major kind of government centers and these jobs nodes don't decide to just pop up out of nowhere. They're a lot of the time incentivized, but there's also so much planning that goes into it. Like there is planning to make sure that it's not all full of competing industries. Like there's probably one major transport thing and one major medical thing, and they're not all competing. Because if there was no plan as well, it's like if everyone could just pick where they were going to set up and that was it, everyone would fight over the best, quote unquote, best places, and then no change would ever happen outside of anything central, and the economy would kind of just not
Yeah, to be a
function too well.
scattergun approach. I mean, like,
Yeah.
think about it like this. Imagine if the government decided, okay, we're going to put a new WorkSafe office that is going to employ 5,000 people, and we're just going to go plonk it randomly in some. We're going to put it out in some tiny town, which has only got 10 people in it. And they go and build this high-rise building that's going to house all of the employees and all of that kind of stuff. And there was a single lane road going in there, and there was 90 houses in the town. Do you think that would go well? No, probably not. They wouldn't be able to get anyone out there. So when they start seeding these locations, they need to start thinking, okay, well, what is the density of industry? What is the type of industry? What is the makeup of the types of workers? Where are they going to live? Are they going to be commuting workers? Are they going to live closer? What is the socioeconomic and psychographic profile of those people that are going to be going to those areas? What are their needs? What kind of facilities would need to be in this location to make this work? It's not just enough to go, okay, we're going to have a bunch of industrial land. Who's going to build a cinema? What's going to make this livable? Is there going to be cafe strips? Do we need to widen the roads? What about a new rail link? There's all of these factors need to go into planning a jobs node, which is why they're so valuable, right? If there's a jobs node precinct which is being announced, you do well to get in there on the front edge of demand, because you know that is good. That's a long strategy that the government is going to be pushing demand there, like actively, not passively. It's not like, well, we'll just kind of draw a circle on a map and go, hey guys, there's the jobs nodes out there.
Yeah.
It's they will manufacture the success of that project, which is why they're so interesting.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you said, there's a lot of planning that goes into it beforehand, so they're very rarely going to get that wrong, right? But it's also, if things are not going as planned for that government or that industry that's moved there, they will, they invest a lot of money in setting up those kind of jobs nodes and those locations and the infrastructure to make that work. So if there's any signs that it's not working, they're going to keep pushing to make it work. It's very rare that those kind of organizations kind of throw in the towel and go, okay, well, this didn't work, because they've just basically sunk. Ultimately, they're all businesses, right? So they've just sunk a lot in something that didn't work, and that usually doesn't go well to just let happen. So my point is more, you're right, if you can ride the wave with a jobs node, it's very unlikely that it will go wrong, because the governments and the industries and the different bodies involved will fight like hell to make sure that it works.
Totally. It's an interesting thing, because I think we always talk about the Holy Trinity.
Yes.
When we talk about the Holy Trinity, we always talk about cash flow positive properties in high growth areas with value add potential.
Yep.
Now, the most common way of finding those locations, or where we typically find those locations, is actually the Holy Trinity of finding a hotspot, right? Mm-hmm. And that is affordability, transport and infrastructure, and jobs nodes. If you can find those three factors working together, where there's specifically planned commercial and industrial projects happening aligned with infrastructure development and expansion, and as well there's relative affordability, which subsequently typically indicates higher yields, that's bam, right? Just go bam, you're in. That's where you can go. Now, here's the thing. There's kind of right now, 2020 has shifted that. So no, that Holy Trinity still is absolutely a perfect mix. So I'll just recap on that again. Jobs nodes, affordability, transport, infrastructure. Those three factors out of all of these 10, they work beautifully together. They are so harmonious in what they provide that it creates a lot of growth opportunity, particularly if you can get in early, right? So you can look out for those factors. However, 2020's created a whole nother Holy Trinity, which I'm going into 2021 is the one that I'm actually most excited about. It is lifestyle, affordability, and infrastructure, right? And that's purely driven by the fact that jobs nodes, while still important, there's a propensity for people to work remotely now. So that's created this environment where jobs can be anywhere, and they don't have to be in proximity to those specific commercial locations. That doesn't change the fact that most people don't have the luxury to just go and work from their laptop wherever they want. So you can kind of look at these two slightly different Holy Trinities to think about the best places for you to invest. Now, interestingly, we talked about lifestyle before. Now, lifestyle doesn't have to be by the beach. Lifestyle can be regional, and it can be a country area. And this is actually something that we are seeing so much more now at the end of 2020 and as we go into 2021. You know, there are regional locations like Dubbo, which have done pretty well in the past, but actually people are going, well, like if you look at the vacancy rate of Dubbo from January 2020 to now, it's plummeted. It's fallen off a cliff, right? Because more and more people are going, you know what, I'm going to move out there because I have the ability to do what I want, where I want, with who I want. And same thing goes for even places like very unsuspecting locations, places like Tamworth, for example, which have got a lot of good jobs growth. And people are now going, okay, hang on a second. Places like Orange have gone up in value quite a lot. And so there are kind of these regional locations which have gone up quite a lot in value, and people are then looking for the next best thing. And that's the ripple effect in play there as well. And also then jobs growth, and also then transport and infrastructure and affordability and lifestyle, because all of these places have got airports and they've also got good road links. So it's very interesting when you start tying that kind of stuff together and start thinking outside the box.
Do you think there's an element of that where people might be, like, considering the events of 2020, might be moving back home? Like areas like Dubbo, it's like people may have grown up there and their families, like their core families, still live there. So, but then, you know, they got a job in the city, so they moved to Sydney or wherever. And then maybe through 2020 they may have lost their job or something happened, or they can work remotely or something, and they've realised their value is actually their family and they want to be close to their family and may move back. Do you see that might be at play?
I don't know.
Don't know.
On that,
speculating again.
I usually try and know things. On that front, I don't know. Like, I don't know necessarily whether people are more prone to move back to places where they originated from. If you were to ask my opinion,
it's probably too early to tell yet.
If you were to ask my opinion, I'd probably say broadly no. It's obviously going to apply in some people's situation, but if you imagine young couple meet, like two individuals, they move to the city when they're 18. They grew up in the city, chasing their corporate career or whatever, and then they meet. And one of them is from, I don't know, Dubbo, and the other one's from the Latrobe Valley. They have kids. They live in Sydney. Oh, my God, life's great. Coronavirus hits. Let's move back home to be with family. But which way do they go? Fair. Right? It's actually more, I think, in some cases that's going to be applicable, and in some cases there'll be a stronger desire potentially. If there's a young family, for example, it's quite common for to want to be near the female partner's family. That's quite a common trend that people say, because they want to be near their mum and all that, raising kids, they don't know what they're doing, all that kind of stuff, right? Which is pretty normal. However, I think it's probably just as likely that a young couple like ourselves would go, that's great, mum and dad, and yes, we will come and visit you. However, we have a greater desire to live near the beach in a warmer location. Thanks. And so I don't know that that's necessarily the play, but I think when you start factoring in all of these other things like affordability, jobs, infrastructure, lifestyle, all these kind of factors together, that's where you really start to see the magic happen. Cool. So that's it.
That's it.
We've done it.
We did it. It is now 2025, but we got there.
Totally. And I think here's the interesting big takeaway out of this this whole series, this series finale, and all the other parts we've done with it. I encourage you to go back and listen to them all. But the big takeaway is really that you need to start breaking free from these preordained paradigms around where is a good location and where is not a good location. You know, there's a lot of hype and hyperbole around, buy here or it's a growth location. Anyone can say that. You know, in fact, I had a chat with a guy last week who was referred to us by a client because he was being pitched to by a developer who was saying growth location, blah, 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 billions in infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Positive cash flow.
Yeah, positive cash flow after tax and all of this kind of stuff. But his friend had a look at the deal and said something doesn't stack up here, referred him to me to have a quick chat. Now, and the interesting thing was it didn't really have any of these factors. You know, it was very speculative. It was kind of like what we spoke about earlier. It was in this like inverted commas growth corridor. It's like, yeah, but when?
It's a really good example.
Yeah. it was, I'll talk about it more specifically. So he was being pitched that the way that he was going to make all this money was to build in a development site in Pimpamar, and that it was going to be positive cash flow once he lost a heap of money on negative gearing, and that there was billions in infrastructure happening and all of this kind of stuff. And yeah, that's great. And ostensibly, and as I said to him, I said everything they're saying is true. Yes, you will make your cash back after you lose money on negative gearing and claim your tax back. Cool. Yeah, you get that, and depreciation and stuff. All good. Yeah, you'll get that. And yes, that is a growth corridor that is happening between the Gold Coast and Brisbane. And yes, there is billions in infrastructure happening there. However, you've got like all these other competing factors that are working against it. Things like supply risk, things like lack of lifestyle, and all these other kind of factors. So the idea with this series is that what you should be able to do is you should be able to use this almost like a playbook. You should be able to download the guide, look at this, and whenever you're thinking or you hear about a location, if someone says, oh my God, there's this new hotspot and it's out in wherever, you should be able to get out your playbook and you should be able to go, okay, cool. So what are these factors has it got? And how would I know? And how can I test my hypothesis? And is this on the front edge of demand? Does it have an urban renewal project? Does it have the characteristics of the stayers? Is it a lifestyle location? What about the transport and infrastructure? Is it like Wooli? Great lifestyle, it's on the beach, but no one's going to move there. So you can start to then use this as your guide to finding the best locations. And because they're based on a set of principles rather than just tactics necessarily, you're going to be able to apply this same thinking in 2021 and in 2022 and in 2023, and you're still going to find the same results as long as you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, it's a really good example you brought up, because I think it's so much easier for people to just buy in locations that other people recommend are good, and other people you think have more authority, or there might be implying certain growth projections or whatnot, and you think that they've got the authority and you think you know nothing, so you listen to them because you see them as, well, they're in real estate, right? So they must know more than me. But if you've listened to this whole series, I'm telling you, you would know more than most real estate agents.
100%. Absolutely you would.
And this is kind of part of why we're doing this whole thing, is because we want to, like you just said, we want to empower everyone that's listening to understand that there's these 10 kind of main things that you can apply to any location that you're thinking about, or if someone recommends an area. Don't just listen to them because they say like, oh, well, it's going to ripple this way. It's going to ripple out from Brisbane and go up that way. And it's like, okay, but what's going to keep it there? And when is that going to happen? And like, what's the industry like? And what's the infrastructure like? And actually be a bit more intelligent and analytical about your decisions, because it is ultimately like it's your responsibility. A lot of people like to take the advice of someone else and then decide that they were pressured into it, and then
you can't outsource responsibility.
No, and then they go, well, it wasn't my responsibility because somebody else told me about it. But ultimately, if you go and buy in a location, that is your responsibility. Again, this is part of why we're here, is because we're trying to help people make the right decisions, so that they don't end up making the wrong decisions and feel stuck because they've listened to the wrong people. But it's I lost my train of thought.
Oh no. Well, do you want me to pick it up?
What was I saying?
Don't listen to false prophets who just peddle ideas. Think for yourself.
It's gone.
Okay, cool. Well, I want to bring this back to another little thing, because past, and this is a really great thing for this whole series as well. Past performance is never an indicator of future performance, right? So a lot of people say, oh my God, what's been the historical growth over the last couple of years? Doesn't matter. Like, it basically does not matter. These 10 factors that we've illustrated to you over this series, and you can get again in the resources section on the investorlab.com.au, these matter way more than past price performance. Like, past price performance literally doesn't mean anything. And if you go back to the first episode, the example we used was that in 2012, if you were going to invest 600 grand, would you have been better off investing in Darwin or Sydney? Now, in 2012, you would have probably been thinking Darwin, because Darwin had been booming, right? And if you looked at the past price performance, it was going off. It was going off. Now, in 2012, if you had invested 600 grand in Darwin, you probably would have had about 6% growth in the next year, and then it would have gone backwards from there because it was already like the economy there was getting frothy, and if you looked at the fact these hotspot factors, it was starting to lack them. However, if you looked at Sydney in 2012, everyone thinks, oh my God, Sydney, their prices always go up. They don't. Like in 2012, the historical growth in Sydney was poor. It was mediocre at best. You know, like it was a bit of it was a swamp when in terms of growth. However, if you invested 600 grand in Sydney in 2012, you probably would have had about 14% growth and continued growth over the rest of the next 7 or 8 years. Right, and so this is the difference between being able to identify these kind of growth locations in advance and positioning yourself on the front edge of demand, rather than just going, okay, well, I'll just follow the crowd, I'll be a sheep, I'll be part of the herd, and I'll go where everyone else tells me to go. Because if you're just following the crowd, you're probably going to get burnt, or at best have an underperforming property portfolio.
And like we've been saying, like it's way easier to follow the crowd, right? It is way easier.
It's so much less scary.
Way easier to hear that a location is a hotspot, and you hear a lot of people say that it's a hotspot, so I'm going to go over there because it's easier. Like I put my trust in whoever I'm listening to, and that's where I'm going to go. And then if it all goes wrong, then it's all right. I listened to someone else and it wasn't really my decision.
Yeah.
Way easier to do that, but the kind of results that we know are possible for everyone that's listening, it's like they're not easy results. Like not everyone can get amazing results. Not everyone can build a property portfolio. That's why not everyone has a property portfolio, because most of the time people take the easy route. Most of the time people make decisions based on what other people think and what other people tell them and what other people kind of give them the permission to act upon, versus actually doing the work and actually kind of educating yourself and actually just thinking a little bit more before you just follow the crowd, which is just what we've been talking about.
Exactly. There's a reason that 74% of property investors never get past one property and 92% never get past two.
Yep.
And that's exactly what you just spoke about. You know, following the crowd, buying in the wrong place, not buying the right types of assets. I really hope that this series has helped people to start to weed through that noise and to make the right decisions for themselves. Mm-hmm. So, on that note, guys, let's wrap it up. If you want to find out more about this, then as I've mentioned a couple of times in this episode, head to the investorlab.com.au, go to the resource section, download the how to identify a real estate hotspot guide. That's going to give you everything you need to know. And of course, if you want some one-to-one help with that, just reach out and let us know. We can have a chat. And if we're not the right fit to help you, then we'll steer you in the right direction and refer you to someone who is. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we wish you all the best and the greatest levels of prosperity. And if you've enjoyed this series, then please let us know, because we love the feedback. Thanks, guys. We'll see you on the next episode.